Welcome back to Carneades.org. Today we're going to be continuing with our month-long series, How to Write a Philosophy Paper. In this video we're going to be looking at lending support. Now, one might separate your possible contributions to the discussion of any philosophical topic into two broad categories, negative and positive contributions. Negative contributions are objections or criticism, which might give us reason to doubt a particular position. Positive contributions, on the other hand, make a positive case for a reason to hold a particular position. As a skeptic, clearly, I'm often in the camp of providing negative reasons because they're easier, and I think it's really hard to actually justify a positive position. But if you want to take on something that is more of a challenge but lets you have more of a say in what you're doing, a positive position is a great way to go. Since our default epistemic status is one of skepticism, the work of the positive contributor is inherently harder than the work of the objector. The burden of proof rests on the claimant. The claimant needs to show that all objections fail, while the objector merely needs one to succeed in order to show their position. Making a positive case is therefore generally much more difficult than merely offering objections. In this video, we're going to cover two kinds of positive contributions you can make to a discussion. Basic responses, which can be found even in short papers, as well as full arguments which lend to support to a particular position. In the next video, we're going to look at another different way of offering a positive response, which we're going to call offering a third way. The simplest positive contribution that you can add looks a lot like an objection, but is instead an objection to an objection, sometimes referred to as a response. This can be found even in a very short paper. You offer a response when you summarize an argument and one specific objection to that argument, but then, on your own, try to show that that objection is unfounded and thereby defend the original argument. So you could have a very simple paper where you introduce a topic, you give your definitions, you summarize a basic argument, you look at one objection to that argument, and then you provide one or multiple responses to that objection, giving reasons that the original argument does in fact succeed. That could exist in a small paper, but it could also exist in a medium or a longer paper. For longer papers, you can simply increase the quantity of objections that you respond to, especially for a famous argument that's been objected to from all sides. You can try to respond to all of the objections that are out there. Or you can improve the quality of the responses that you're offering. You can go into great depth of why an opposing objection is wrong. But offering defense of an argument is more challenging than objecting to it, but it's not as challenging as crafting your own argument from scratch in support of the position. If you want to lend real or substantial support to a particular conclusion, you might consider not only defending it against all objections, but crafting a new and unique argument for the same conclusion. This would be kind of going a step further for a longer paper where it's not just that you think that all of the objections are wrong, but you think there's more arguments that can be offered for the conclusion other than the ones that the initial author offers. And that's what we're going to call lending support. The argument that you offer should be distinct from the original argument that the first author offers. Particularly powerful methods of support rely on very different assumptions from the original argument, or are based in a very different worldview, so that someone cannot deny your conclusion even if they reject the original philosopher's background beliefs. Basically, you might have a conclusion that you think is really solid, but in order to argue for that conclusion, another philosopher takes on a particularly esoteric worldview, or was shown by a later objector that their premises actually imply that they have to bite a pretty big bullet. If you really think that conclusion is substantial, but don't want to bite that bullet yourself, you could offer a different argument for that same conclusion that doesn't rely on those same premises, and therefore show that you don't need to bite the bullet in order to draw this conclusion. Basically, the original argument shows that P implies Q. So this is very powerful when the two positions that you're looking at are contradictory, so that your worldview and the worldview of the original author are completely contradictory. So basically that happens when the original argument shows that P implies Q. But I want to show that even if you deny P, you can conclude that Q. And if you have that P implies Q and not P implies Q, then you're pretty solidly on board with Q, regardless of your opinion on P. So lending support is also particularly effective when you are able to avoid a particularly problematic weakness of the original argument. And this is why it's important to understand the ongoing debate around an argument like this before you look at providing support, so that you can say, wow, people always object to this one premise that's particularly shaky or problematic. I think that we can run this argument without that premise, and here's how. Say that the argument originally implied that one would need to bite a big bullet, for example, or rely on a controversial modal logic system like S5. Effective support might avoid that bullet or rely on a more standard version of logic. You might not have to assume that controversial position, or you might be able to rely on a more widely accepted version of logic. Lending support has the advantage and disadvantage of requiring you to stay with one of the initial positions presented. This is beneficial in that it doesn't require you to come up with a new position, and is likely to have the backing of many philosophers that have argued for that position before. However, it can be limiting in that it means that your conclusion is already set, and you need to come up with just a better way to argue for it. And it's also important for you to do sufficient research such that you know that your argument is actually unique and new, and it's not something that someone has already actually offered. In the next video, we'll look at, if you didn't like having to stick with a conclusion that's already there, a different way to offer a positive solution, which we'll call promoting a third way. Watch this video and more here at Carneades.org, and stay skeptical, everybody.